My name is Audrey Whaling. I am a program manager for the U.S. GBC of West Michigan, which is why you're all here, and I oversee the Lansing 2030 district. I am very excited to introduce our keynote speaker this evening, Sandra Lupien. Sandra leads MassTimber at MSU, advancing sustainable mass timber construction and manufacture in Michigan, the Great Lakes region, and beyond. Through this program based at Michigan State University, Sandra collaborates with interdisciplinary faculty members, industry partners, policymakers, NGOs, tradespersons, and others on a diverse array of programs and initiatives that have resulted in a significant mass timber momentum. Sandra became captivated with mass timber while pursuing a mid-career Master of Public Policy at the University of California, Berkeley, where she produced her capstone titled Removing Barriers to Cross-Laminated Timber Manufacture and Adoption in California, a game changer for wildfire, forest, and climate change. Immediately before joining MSU, Sandra served as Deputy Director in the California Governor's Office of Planning and Research after serving in policy, communication, and engagement leadership roles in the nonprofit and public sector for nearly 2 decades. Please join me in giving Sandra a warm welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much, Audrey, and hello, everybody. It's such a joy and a pleasure and so much fun to be here with this beautiful room of people who care so much about the impacts and the quality of our built environment. And importantly, thank you so much to the U.S. GBC of West Michigan team for inviting me to be your keynote speaker tonight. It's really quite an amazing honor and just very excited to be here. So I'm going to talk with you tonight about mass timber in Michigan, what is going on here, as well as beyond Michigan, and what are the benefits, momentum, and opportunities for all of us to continue to advance mass timber. Now I'm going to see if the clicker works for me. It does. Great. So first I'll introduce you to our program, MassTimber at MSU. We are a collaboration across the MSU Department of Forestry, the School of Planning, Design, and Construction, and MSU Extension. So you can kind of see how we're joining with forests, with built environments, using outreach and stakeholder engagement, as well as research, curriculum development and teaching, and a variety of other methods to advance mass timber construction and manufacture here in Michigan, the Great Lakes region, and beyond. Importantly, we work in close collaboration with a number of state agencies, most especially the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, which is very interested in seeing mass timber manufacture taking place in Michigan with Michigan Wood and putting Michiganders to work manufacturing and fabricating new products, things we're very, very good at in our state. So mass timber, I know many of you will know this term. Maybe everybody in the room knows this term and knows what it means, but I don't care because I always level set anywhere I present. When I say mass timber, I'm using a term to refer to a variety of really, really big engineered wood building construction materials that we like to use in large buildings in ways that we haven't been able to use wood structurally before, right? So build really tall buildings with wood. We haven't really been able to do this before. Now we can. So keywords, engineered, so distinct from like heavy timber, which is sawn from a single log, engineered, panelized, big. That's all you need to know. Lots of different types of mass timber, glue laminated timber, you know what that is. It's been in our building codes for a long time. Cross-laminated timber, this is the type of mass timber that actually caused the term mass timber to be coined. These are layers of dimensional lumber placed in a perpendicular layup with adhesive between them. They're pressed in a gigantic hydraulic press, and they're very, very large, and we can use them both for gravity and the lateral resistance system in a building, right? So again, this is the thing we haven't been able to do before with wood. Yeah? Okay, mass plywood panels, similar concept, plywood on steroids, cross-laminated plywood sheets. And then we've got nail laminated timber, that's been around for a long time, dowel laminated timber, put it together with wooden dowels instead of adhesives, and then laminated veneer lumber, so kind of like veneer columns and beams, right? So all these different types of mass timber, all in the same family. We're very excited about their applications, but for a lot of other reasons, we're excited about them too. So Audrey talked a little bit about it. I'm going to do this really fast because I know that I'm between you and like a bunch of awards and like dessert. So we're gonna blow through this. But my interest in mass timber, right? I'm not an architect. I don't have a construction background. I'm not an engineer. I'm also not a forester. I'm a person who worked in climate policy and like urban planning and kinds of those types of areas, right? And always was looking for this thing that would be the thing that felt to me like it was uniting the natural environment with the places we live. And it was just really hard. Like I know energy is like the biggest slice of the carbon pie, but I was never like an energy nerd. It didn't get me. So when I learned about mass timber, I got super excited. And the reason I learned about it, right, I was living in California for a very long time. I am from Michigan originally. But I was living there and seeing drought-stricken forests, drought exacerbated by climate change, where hundreds of millions of trees were dying due to bark beetle infestation. And this is what the forests look like, right? And I thought, and my friend also thought, what can we do to remove some of this dead wood in these overly dense forests, too many trees per acre, causing high severity wildfire risk? We hear about it all the time, right? What can somebody do with this wood to get it out of there without wasting the wood? How can we store the carbon in that wood in a long-lived, durable product? So the first thing we did was made furniture. That was fun. We made furniture, but then we were quickly like, wow, there is way too much of this wood. This is us saying, there is too much of this wood. But we really cared. We're out there in the rain, you know, miserable, but we're looking at all the wood, and we think, there's too much wood. What else can you do with this wood that's scalable? So someone at the US Forest Service said, hey, do you guys know about mass timber? And we said, no. And this was in like 2017. No, what is that? And he told us, and we thought, well, can we make mass timber? What does it take to manufacture mass timber? So we pivoted our business planning to look at, could we do that? And as we were looking at that business case, we were thinking about using all of these like low-value woods that didn't have a pathway to the value stream yet, right? Like nobody's using these low-value or waste materials, so it's hard to access them in a sustainable, scalable way. So I did my master's thesis looking at how could California help remove barriers to getting that wood and turning it into mass timber. And then we were like, we're not going to do this. This is crazy. But all I wanted to do was work on mass timber all the time and help it become mainstream. So that's what I ended up doing. And I ended up circuitously coming to Michigan State University, returning to Michigan, my home state, to help advance mass timber here, because I was so captivated by all the benefits. And I'll start with the beauty and the biophilia benefits associated with mass timber, right? Wood is a beautiful material. People love to be in environments with wood. People have real, measurable, beneficial responses to living and working and playing and studying in buildings with exposed wood, including mass timber. That effect, probably most of you know, is called biophilia, the happy feelings of being exposed to natural elements, right? And it's also a very flexible material from a design perspective, right? These are just three of many, 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 many examples of mass timber buildings. They all have a very different look, right? One's an office building in Minneapolis. The one in the middle is kind of like this very cool U-shaped tech hub in the Netherlands. And then there's a McDonald's. So you can even elevate a McDonald's by using mass timber. I wonder if it like negates the negative impacts of eating the McDonald's. I don't think it does. Thank you for laughing. From a design and engineering perspective, this is now where some of you who are in the architecture and engineering side of this are going to maybe start feeling excited. This is a high-performance material, right? I said that when I started my presentation. It's big. We can use it structurally. It can do lateral resistance. We can use it in the same ways that we use steel and concrete in buildings, right? But it's lighter weight than steel and concrete. But it has a great strength property. So it has a great strength to weight ratio, which means, right, if you're designing a building, you're putting up a tall building, the mass timber won't be as heavy, so maybe you won't need to have as much of a robust foundation, for example. So it's a way to kind of save on materials, perhaps. It works well in a hybrid structural system or on its own. So you can make a building that is a steel and mass timber structural system, or you can make a structure that's all mass timber. You can kind of do a bunch of different types of things with it. And then it also performs well in seismic testing, which is relevant today because you might have heard there was a magnitude 7 earthquake in Northern California, right, which is actually the highest, it consumes the most mass timber in the country, though it doesn't yet manufacture any mass timber. But, you know, because mass timber, it performs really well. This, I'm not going to play this video, I think, but there's a video here on the right that is a seismic testing of this 10-story mass timber building that they built in San Diego, and they put it on a shake table, and they shook it up to 7.7 magnitude over the course of many days, and it showed almost no damage at all, and just performed extraordinarily well. So that's an exciting property. Let's see. Is it going to play? No, good. Okay. Design and engineering, fire resistance. Who's sitting there thinking, why would we build a skyscraper out of wood? Won't it burn? Anyone thinking that? Anyone? Yes, that person is brave and says yes. Yeah, it's very, it seems very counterintuitive to think that mass timber, a gigantic wood building made of mass timber, could be fire resistant. But it is, right? So any campers, campfire builders in the room? Yeah. So when you build a campfire, what do you do before you put the log in the campfire? You split it. Why do you split it? So it catches faster, there's more airflow, more surface area available. I saw someone do this. I think this means more surface area available, it catches faster. You split it, right? And so compare like an unsplit log in your campfire to a 2x4 unexposed in a building. It burns right up, right? Yeah, we don't want that. But if you put an unsplit log into a campfire, you put the whole log in, you're sitting there, maybe you have kids, maybe you don't, maybe you're really getting grumpy because you're freezing, somebody wants s'mores, they can't make them because the log has charred and put the fire out. The inner layer of the log does not burn. This is what happens with mass timber. If you look at the photo here on the bottom right, that shows the before and after of a glue-laminated timber member being fire tested, right? And you can see how the fire charred the outside, but the inside of that is still intact. And those inside layers are your structural system, or your structural panels, your structural layers, and you are designing the fire resistance into your mass timber system so that you don't typically have to cover it up. You don't have to fire protect it. It is having its fire resistance built right in by design and also by nature. Cool, right? So from a construction perspective, mass timber can help buildings be built faster and more efficiently. And in an environment where especially we need to build like lots of density housing really fast, this is pretty appealing. Mass timber is a prefabricated kit of parts, which maybe you knew or didn't know, but all of your, if you are working on a mass timber building, all of your CLT panels, all of your glue-laminated timber columns and beams, as well as all of the hardware comes to your site ready to assemble. Openings for doors and windows have been cut out in the factory. Holes for connectors have been pre-drilled. It's all ready to go. So it can go up pretty quickly like Lego, or for the people who are like my age and older, an erector set, right? It goes up fast. And that is something that can save your construction team a lot of time. And there are also obviously then fewer components to assemble, less waste to dispose of because you're not like sawing stuff on site, and then those finishes that don't need to go on it for fire protection. And some studies have shown that that can reduce your construction time by as much as 15 to 20%. And if you are a construction manager, a GC in this room, any GCs in the room, you know that that saves money on your project. That's a lot of money, a lot of time in the field saved. And then, of course, you don't need as many people to actually build a mass timber project compared with like a stick frame building, for example, or even a steel and concrete structure. These large panels and columns and beams go together so quickly, they don't require as many people. Meanwhile, on the flip side of that, for jobs in the economy, on the forest side, right, we know that across the United States, we have a history built on forest products, a forest products industry. We know that we have timberlands. We know that when people harvest those timberlands, they make money. They also have money to reinvest in keeping their forest lands healthy and resilient, right? But we've had a depressed forest products industry and a depressed forest management context in the country for quite a long time. So this can revitalize both the ability to for forest land owners to manage their forests and bring in revenue to do it. It can also revitalize the forestry industry, timber harvesting, milling, kilning, dry kilning wood. All of these industries, especially in rural communities, need to be revitalized. And then it can create new jobs, new manufacturing jobs, new value-added fabrication jobs, as well as new types of construction jobs, right? The Carpenters Union in Michigan is so excited about mass timber that they've started training their members. They have a cross-laminated timber mock-up on their training floor in Detroit. And so do the ironworkers. So that's going to be fun to see how that plays out. Looking forward to that. But it's exciting that they all want to get in the game. And here's the reason I got excited about mass timber and that I wanted to spend my time working on mass timber. And this is the benefits related to forests, to carbon and climate change, and sustainability. I know you've all seen this pie 20 bazillion times in your lives. And the US Green Building Council certainly relies on this data. And it's very important data, right? The buildings and construction industry are responsible for about 39% of global carbon emissions, right? When you look at this pie, the blue slice that's outlined in red, that's related to buildings, carbon in buildings, and that's operational carbon, right? You all know that that's the carbon related to energy use and use and production. And you guys are, like, everybody's addressing that. That's being addressed. It's being addressed well. We know how to address it. We don't always make the right choices, but we have policies, we have incentives. We know we have the technology to reduce the amount of energy we're using, to transform our use to renewable and greener energy sources. And so that slice of the pie, we know how to make that come down. It's very exciting. Meanwhile, at the same time, we need to be working on building materials. That's the little green slice of the pie that says 11%. That's the building construction industry. And that's where we're looking at the materials, right? That 11% is mostly attributable to steel, concrete, and glass. If we can start replacing or reducing the amount of steel and concrete that we're using and use a renewable building construction material, wood, instead, we can start making that slice of the pie a little bit smaller, right? And at the same time, we can benefit forests. So this infographic has a lot going on it, and it's a little bit like lots of arrows pointing in at each other. But what I want you to be noting, right, and just remembering is that wood is a renewable resource. When we harvest trees and use them in wood products, we plant more of them. In the United States and in North America, our forest management practices are generally quite sustainable. We are doing sustainable management of forests in North America. This is not true everywhere in the world. There are many tropical rainforests where deforestation is happening. That is not what we are talking about when we're harvesting trees and replanting them and doing that in a good way so that we can access all the benefits of forests, right? For cleaning our air, cleaning our water, providing wildlife habitat, providing recreational opportunities, but then also providing wood for products. And that provision of wood for products gives us, in our economic model, right, capitalism, the incentive to take care of those forests, right? We need to have that economic incentive, otherwise we're not very good at taking care of things. So this helps keep forests as forests and helps us have the incentive to plant more of them and take care of them. But then, when we do harvest the wood and then replant more trees, the wood that we use, if we're using it in a product like mass timber, which is large, it uses a lot of wood, it lasts a really long time, the carbon absorbed, as carbon dioxide by trees when they're growing through the process known as carbon sequestration, photosynthesis, carbon sequestration, that carbon remains stored in the wood, right? Once you make the building product, it's stored in there. So if, the wood in this building, a wood in a mass timber building, is storing carbon, it's about 50% carbon by dry weight. So that carbon is locked up in the building for as long as the building is a building. Other materials don't do that, right? So if we're building more and more buildings in this way, we can start transforming our buildings from being massive sources of carbon, and everyone in this room is working on reducing those sources of carbon in all these different ways. We can add to that by then storing carbon in our building materials. That's cool. And here's a new study that shows us, that models in one way. There's a lot of different ways to model this, but this study is really being seen as very robust. It uses a whole building life cycle analysis approach, right, from cradle to grave, and all of these different elements are included in the model, right? That's all of the embodied carbon related to transportation, sourcing, manufacture, taking it to the building, building the building, and then maintaining the building, Those white fields, that's the operational carbon. That's not included in the model because it's seen to be kind of a wash between mass timber and other structures. And then the end of life of the building, how do we take it down? And then what do we do with it after it's taken down, okay? And this model compares 3 different types of building system based on the 2021 International Building Code, the global warming potential of a reinforced concrete structure, a structural steel structure, and a mass timber structure. And here's what it finds. When we look at just the embodied carbon, not the stored carbon, just the embodied carbon, the global warming potential of a mass timber building is versus a concrete building can be 31 to 50% lower. But when we then add in the stored carbon, that changes to 81 to 94% lower, and that's for mass timber versus concrete. And for steel, it's 76 to 91% lower. So you can really start to see how this can really add to all of the work that we're doing to address operational carbon by then storing carbon too. So now that I've told you why I'm so super excited about mass timber, and I hope you're getting excited about mass timber too, I'm going to just give you a brief little history of mass timber in the United States by starting with some milestones, some just big things that kind of made mass timber, that chart the pathway of mass timber from when it came to the United States until today. And importantly, you all know that mass timber really kind of emerged in Europe about 40 years ago and started taking hold over these decades between then and now. We know that before the 1980s, there were already certain types of products that we now refer to as mass timber in our building codes: glue laminated timber, glue lam, and nail laminated timber. They've been around for a long time. You've seen them in buildings, probably. I know we've all seen them. But in the 1980s, this cross-laminated timber emerged in Europe, in Austria and Germany, and people got really excited about this new ability to build big buildings with wood. Then in the early 2010s, cross-laminated timber started becoming of interest in the US, especially in the Pacific Northwest, where they also had some forest management reasons for wanting to do this, a really strong desire to revitalize the forest products industry, and then also to be building buildings more sustainably. In 2015, we had the first US-produced cross-laminated timber happen in Oregon. And then in 2016, a bunch of people got together and said, boy, we really should be talking about this together more. Let's have a conference. They held the first International Mass Timber Conference in Portland, Oregon, attended at that time by 500 people. Not bad for a first-time conference, but now that's attended by about 4,000 people. So you can see the community is growing. Then we had the first tall mass timber building in the United States that same year, 2016. And then we had the first building to actually use that domestically produced cross-laminated timber. And that was led by Lever Architects in Oregon, very committed to saying, yes, we want mass timber, and yes, we want to support domestic production. In 2018, we saw the first multi-family high-rise mass timber building. And then in 2022, the tallest mass timber building in the world went up right here in the United States. Anyone know where this is? No cheaters, the people I talked to before. Milwaukee, correct. And I'll talk about that building in just a second. So that first tall mass timber building I showed used glue lam and nail laminated timber, and it was in Minneapolis. It was called T3. And look, it's tall, it's 7 stories. So, not super tall, but tall. It was the first one. Albina Yard in Portland, Oregon, this was the first one to use domestic cross-laminated timber. Beautiful building, office space with some retail on the bottom floor. Carbon 12 in Portland was that first mass timber high-rise multifamily housing development, 8 stories in Portland, Oregon also. You're noticing a pattern. Now it's changing. The pattern has shifted. That tall building in Milwaukee, this is the Ascent Milwaukee Tower. It is the tallest mass timber building in the world at 25 stories. It's 18 stories of mass timber on top of a 7-story concrete podium, and comprises glue laminated timber and cross-laminated timber. And this building's really interesting from a building review and a permitting perspective, in that the city's lead fire official in Milwaukee was like, this is cool, I think this is really important, and I'm gonna work hard with you to make this work. And this is an important champion on this project. Okay, we're back to Portland now. So this is a very important project that just opened this year. This is the biggest use of mass plywood panels anywhere, and this is a Portland, Oregon airport terminal. 9-acre roof, gigantic. Anyone been in here yet? Yeah, ooh, I'm jealous, I can't wait. We'll all fly in together when we go to the International MassTimber Conference in March, but this is a really cool project. It's beautiful. It uses mass plywood panels, and something that's very interesting about this project is that all the wood for this project was sourced within 300 miles of the site from 11 different landowners, 4 of them being tribal communities that participated in extremely close partnership and collaboration to make this project happen. Okay, so those are just a few examples. This is what demand looks like across the United States, right? Mass timber demand has more than quintupled since 2018 in this country, and we're seeing all different types of projects all over the place. And we're also seeing a lot of action in Michigan, right? So we're seeing all this demand nationally. This is really important and exciting, but what is happening here in Michigan? And why do we care, right? Well, first of all, Michigan is a heavily forested state, right? 53% of the state is treed. It has forests. We have 19.3 million acres of forest land in the state, and the 5th highest amount of timberlands in the country. So we have a really strong forest context here, right? And we also make stuff. Did you know? We invented cars. We make, oh, I got excited. We make manufacturing equipment. Audrey and I were talking earlier about how we bump things with our hands when we talk. There it went. And then we make furniture, hey, right here in Grand Rapids. But the forest products industry also employs 42,000 people, right, and contributes $13.4 billion in economic output to our economy in the state. It's really important. And we know, based on modeling, this is modeling that our forest economist at Michigan State University did, that if we started a very small mass timber facility in the Upper Peninsula, that would contribute more than $50 million in GDP and more than 270 jobs. And if we did that in the Lower Peninsula, we would see $68 million of contributions to the GDP and more than 400 jobs. So this could really be an economic and workforce generator in the state. But we also need to build. Y'all know that we have a 190,000 housing unit deficit in the state. Many of the units we build need to be density housing. Many of them need to be affordable. Mass timber is a good fit for that. And we need to build more industrial and more institutional buildings as well. And we also have a state climate plan that says we're going to achieve net zero carbon by 2050. And I just told you how mass timber can help with that. The My Healthy Climate Plan mentions mass timber 3 times as a tool in the state's toolkit to achieve net zero carbon. I think it's the only climate plan in the country that does that. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it is. So we need to be pointing to that all the time. And the state of Michigan is already investing in advancing mass timber, right? In the fiscal year 2025 budget, the one the governor just signed this summer, there's a $1 million investment in kind of continuing to build this mass timber ecosystem work that's in progress. The state has already invested $750,000 in our program, MassTimber MSU, to support the work we're doing both to build the mass timber ecosystem and also some specific research projects that we have ongoing. They contributed they've spent $11 million to build their own mass timber building, which I'll talk more about in a moment, but this is in the Upper Peninsula. It's a DNR building. And they contributed $30 million to help MSU build our STEM teaching and learning facility. That's a $100 million project on our campus that opened in July of 2021. And it's a mass timber project. And the legislature, in large part, because this was going to be a mass timber structure, significantly helped to fund that project. So any universities in the room who are like, how can I get that money? You can. So what's on the horizon in Michigan, right? Well, we have a lot of demand growing here. We already have more than 50 mass timber buildings in the pipeline. These are either buildings that are complete or in various stages of construction or design and planning. That's amazing because in 2021, when our STEM teaching and learning facility opened, it was only the 2nd one in the state to have used cross-laminated timber. So we're seeing a lot of interest growing really fast. And the cool thing is that these projects are all over the state. Look at that. I thought they would all be in, I thought they would all be in Grand Rapids, or I thought they would all be in Ann Arbor, but they're really all over the state, in cities, in suburbs, and in small towns. And they're all different types of projects too. A lot of school-type projects, training facilities, government buildings, community centers, housing and affordable housing, even a hotel. So lots of different types of projects in process. Here's some examples of them. This one's not too far away in Muskegon. This is Adelaide Point. Anyone been here or seen this one going up? Yeah. So this is a really cool industrial redevelopment project where they have built 2 mass timber buildings. One is an event center with a restaurant, and the other one is a condominium building. That one's going to be done pretty soon. The event center is open, and they're also planning a hotel on this site. The A.B. Ford Community Center in Detroit. This one went up a couple of years ago. I like to bring this one to the table. It's not a full mass timber structure, but there's a lot of mass timber in the ceiling there, cross-laminated timber. But the cool thing about this project is the reason it has mass timber in it is that the community wanted wood in the building. When they did the community engagement process, which was quite thorough, the community said, we want it to feel like nature inside. Maybe we want to see exposed wood in the building. And so the architect said, well, how about this? Vineyard View, this is the first affordable housing development in the state in Sutton's Bay, in an area that really needs affordable housing. It's a small one, right? 4-unit townhouse style. And it's a hybrid. It uses structural insulated panels with those cross-laminated timber floor decks. This developer, Homestretch Housing, wants to make more mass timber buildings. And the animals get the biophilia too, right? There's a veterinary hospital here over in Westland near Detroit, made of mass timber. And then here's our STEM teaching and learning facility on MSU's campus. If you want to ever see this building, if you haven't been there, please contact me and I will show it to you. Cross-laminated timber, glue-laminated timber, 160,000 square feet of classrooms and laboratory space, as well as collaboration spaces for students who love this building. So in addition to this demand side momentum, right, there's also momentum growing around attracting mass timber production to the state. And there are a lot of different ways that this is being approached. I'm not going to go into the weeds on this right now, but this is what the manufacturing map in North America looks like, right? You can see that there's manufacture clustered in the Pacific Northwest, which you're not surprised about. There's production clustered in the Southeast United States, where they have a lot of southern yellow pine. And then you see, like, way up there in Quebec, a big manufacturer, a little bit more south in St. Thomas, Ontario. That's our closest manufacturer to Lansing. And the closest manufacturer to Grand Rapids is Sterling Structural near Chicago. But there is a lot of room to increase the mass timber, the domestic supply of mass timber, and Michigan is very eager to do it. So our program is doing a lot of things to advance that. We're doing a supply chain analysis and demand survey. We're doing some pilot and demonstration projects using Michigan timber. But the Department of Natural Resources has actually done the most important thing, which is they built that building I just showed you up in Newberry in the Upper Peninsula using Michigan red pine cross-laminated timber panels. So this is really cool because no mass timber products had ever been made out of wood from Michigan before. And we don't have manufacturing nearby. Like, there's a lot of reasons that this is really hard. But DNR said, we insist on using Michigan wood in our cross-laminated timber. We are going to figure out how to do it. And this is going to make everyone who is like a lead expert, their brains are going to go, pew, 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 but just bear with me for a moment. So what they did was they worked with Buer Lumber, which is a big mill in Michigan, sourced the Michigan red pine, and then worked with a manufacturer in Washington State to have that wood shipped there. But all of the research and development that needed to happen, right? Because if you're going to make a cross-laminated timber panel product, you have to try a bunch of different layups, using a bunch of different types of adhesive and curing methods and combinations. You have to do a lot of testing where you break stuff and see, you know, how it's going to fare in the building, and then you have to have it certified. So this manufacturer, Vaughan Timbers, did all of that work and sent the mass timber panels back to Michigan, and now they're all up in the building in Newberry. But the thing about that is, and we're not saying like this is how we should make mass timber, we're saying, cool, now this wood is de-risked, so somebody should come and make it in Michigan, so we have a supply really, really close to the buildings. And that would be good for everyone who's a lead expert. And these are just a couple more pictures. Those are the, in the second picture there, those are the Michigan red pine panels. You can see like they're very knotty, they have a lot of character. Okay. So now I want to talk about policy, my favorite subject. So, this is a new technology. This is a new system. As people who've been working on, increasing energy efficiency in buildings and increasing the amount of solar panels we have on buildings and electrifying buildings, you know that the only way that that happens is when we have policies and incentives. And now we need these for mass timber, right? The first thing we need to do is make sure our building codes are up to date in the state so we can build as many types of mass timber buildings as are allowable. The Michigan Building Code has been very behind for a while. We're on the 2015 version of the of the International Building Code, which does allow for cross-laminated timber and mass timber buildings. It limits the height and the applications, but in Michigan, we can build a lot of mass timber buildings using this code, right? It's not like, oh my gosh, we can't build any buildings. But this is the version of the code we want, the 2021 International Building Code, which defines 3 new types of mass timber buildings in Category 4. Category 4 used to just be heavy timber, again, for that big timber sawn from a single saw log. But now we have 3 types of mass timber buildings plus a heavy timber type. And it allows us to go up to 18 stories with mass timber. So this is what we want. And I'm happy to say that finally, just this week on Tuesday, the legislature, both houses, met with quorum for the required number of times for the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules at the state to be able to move forward with adopting the Michigan 2021 Building Code, which has all these mass timber elements in it. So now we're just waiting for the formal sign-off, and then we're expecting it to take effect in April. So it was a long time coming, but this is where we are. We also, need to be writing mass timber into our state climate action plans, into our local climate action plans, really including it as a type of building material that can help decarbonize our built environments. We can do procurement policies. For example, the U.S. Department of Defense now has a procurement policy that says all new buildings built by the Army Corps of Engineers will consider mass timber first. And not because of the carbon and climate benefits, because of the building performance and because of the benefits to occupants. So it'll be really interesting to see how this is applied once it's been adopted for a while, but how it's going to play out in real life. We need to be able to build taller, and maybe build by right in areas that require special use permits. And this means we need to change building standards and building codes to make that happen. East Lansing just did that. A couple of weeks ago, they adopted the first in our state local mass timber incentive, changing the zoning ordinance to allow developers to earn points for mass timber and for LEED Gold and Platinum, and doing more affordable units, and to spend those points to build taller and to have smaller lot sizes and some other things. And then finally, tax incentives, rebates, tax abatements, all the things that we're doing for renewable energy, energy efficiency, we can also apply to mass timber. And then looking at grant programs as well is going to be very important. So even with all this momentum and even with all of this demand, mass timber still only accounts for 1% of commercial construction in the US, so we have a lot of opportunity to grow. And the key barrier really is a real or perceived green premium associated with being an early adopter of this material. I argue, and I want to say this first, all the policies that I just mentioned will help with this, but really, I think mostly it's a matter of perception and education of project teams, because in cost estimation, teams don't yet know, right, how to estimate for mass timber. It's not in their cost estimating tools. They don't take into account that it requires fewer finishes, and they don't take into account how much faster it goes up until they've built a mass timber project or two and they've ground truthed it for themselves. So we're still seeing it get value engineered out, and that's why our program MassTimber at MSU is educating the architecture and engineering and construction industry, bringing people together to learn together about how to do mass timber projects, and why we're doing a lot of different types of research and curriculum development and training. I have a few opportunities for you to hang out with us and get to know more about mass timber. So you can ask me about these after. You don't have to hurry and take a picture, but if you want to. Next Tuesday, we have the Michigan Mass Timber Update at Adelaide Point, that project I just told you about in Muskegon. We'll have more than 150 people in this room to celebrate all of the mass timber momentum from this past year. The next day will be a workshop by Woodworks, taking a deep dive into how Adelaide Point got made in the Adelaide Point building. And then we host each quarter the Michigan MassTimber Community of Practice, a quarterly online meeting. It's a peer learning community where people bring their questions and have robust conversations about everything that they're thinking and wondering about mass timber to help remove barriers. So if you want to join this, let me know. And then, of course, we organize a delegation to attend to the International Mass Timber Conference each year, and we would love for you to join us and fly into the Portland International Airport Mass Timber Terminal with us and see that beautiful space. So, in conclusion, mass timber can really help transform buildings from GHG emitters into carbon storage banks and benefit forest communities and occupants at the same time. Demand is growing across the US and in Michigan, but we need a lot more professional education and technical assistance for the AEC industry to make sure that they can successfully adopt mass timber. We also need to be training our students and our tradespeople, both through universities and their unions, et cetera, to support increased supply and demand. Michigan is super well positioned to play an important role in the mass timber production landscape in the Great Lakes region. And we need those supportive policies for manufacture and adoption to help provide Michigan with a competitive edge. We really want to be the leader in mass timber in the Great Lakes region and in the country. So with that, I just want to say I really encourage you to learn more about mass timber, to get in touch with me if you'd like to collaborate on any ideas related to policy, related to promoting adoption, or if you would like support in your early mass timber endeavors, whether you're an owner or you're someone on an AEC team. We have a lot of resources and community support to provide to you. So again, thank you so much for having me. I hope you've gotten excited about mass timber, and enjoy the rest of your evening.